This program is brought to you by Emory University.
I'm Rosemary Magee, and I serve as Vice President and Secretary of Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. And we're very honored to be here at Hong Kong Baptist University visiting our colleagues here, our faculty colleagues, and also the administration, and now also our friends, since you visited us at Emory. And this is part of an ongoing series of creativity conversations that we've had on our campus, ranging from President Carter, President Jimmy Carter, and I know you all have an association with President Carter, as do we, to the playwright Edward Albee, to the scientist E.O. Wilson, to poets and writers, and a wide range of people on the topic of creativity. And I'm especially interested in thinking about the ways that Western concepts of creativity intersect and overlap with Eastern ideas. And so that's one of the things that I want to talk with you about today. And I'll let you introduce yourself.
Okay. I'm Albert Chan. I'm President and Vice-Chancellor of Hong Kong Baptist University. Obviously, I'm very happy today, first of all, to welcome our good friend from Emory University. The second thing I'm particularly interested in is because you're heading the Creativity and Arts Initiative at Emory, and we have just established our Creativity Institute of Creativity in Baptist University. This is actually the focal point of the university. We actually get large donations. So far, we get more than $200 million of donation in the last few months for helping us to get the best talents from around the world in different areas. What we want to do is we use creativity to connect the whole university. So we can discuss that later on how we are going to do it. And we also want to learn from your experience.
So I'll start telling you a little bit about our programs, but we have programs that primarily focus on students and give them opportunities to do small research projects where they investigate their own creativity or they work with a faculty researcher on a creative idea. We support some faculty research and creative projects as well. We have an emphasis on the arts in the Creativity and Arts Initiatives. And so we have a large arts showcase that we run every year and have students and faculty participate in that. So a wide range of programs, including bringing in visiting thinkers, scientists, artists. But one of my favorite parts is, in fact, this creativity conversation, because that's where we talk with people from a variety of fields about the creative process. So I'm wondering about, for your Creativity Institute, what your approach will be with that.
Actually, at this moment, we are still searching. Maybe your effort is actually more mature. What we did is we try to get more money from donation, because the university money from our government is very limited. Also, it's already allocated to different areas. So we don't have extra money to run this program. So what we don't want to do is we talk to the people in the community and ask for their help. And usually they are very interested to help if they find your pursuit is very interesting to them, also having an impact on the community. So that's what we want to do at this moment is we select areas that are very important, both to the university and also to the community. For example, we have one program on Chinese medicine. Because for so many thousand years, people have been using Chinese medicine. That's why we have so many Chinese now, because Chinese medicine is very successful.
And we visited your Chinese medicine
this morning.
This morning.
Oh, so, that's very good.
So we have an idea of it's a very expansive.
It's essentially just a beginning of a big thing. So what you see is just the beginning. I hope every year you come, you'll find more expansion and development. The reason we feel Chinese medicine is a good treasure is that there are a lot of very good recipes in Chinese medicine. But we don't know, well, the doctors know how good they are, but you cannot explain it to people who are not in that discipline because we use different elements. That in modern medicine, they don't use the same language. So what we want to do is we want to use modern science to look at the Chinese medicine, break it up, because in Chinese medicine, usually you use more than 10 herbs together, and each herb may have hundreds of different compounds. So you're talking about using thousands of different compounds together, which is unheard of in Western medicine. But they are interrelated. There's a synergy. So what we want to do is we want to understand this. So it's a lot of work. But on the other hand, once you simplify it, you may find a trend or find a certain explainable fact to the people who are going to take the Chinese medicine. So this work, I think, can lead to new development of new drugs. Our community is very interested in that because they can see hope of developing new drugs for future use or even for present use, like Alzheimer's disease, cancer. A lot of diseases we do not have very good treatment at this moment, but there's a hope in Chinese medicine. So what we want to do is we will work together with all of the best talents in China. We don't do it alone because now we believe that each person has his own talent. Each person's power is limited. But by working together, we link each other, like the internet. When you link each other together, you can create
a multiplier effect.
Exactly. You can get a very large power together. So with that large donation we recently got, we expect to run a 10-year program on that. We expect to get a lot of new development and also actually new drugs coming out from this. Also a lot of new knowledge that we didn't know before.
So it sounds like you're taking ancient ideas and ancient knowledge and ancient approaches, and then you're applying modern techniques to those, and through the ancient and the modern together, that forges a synergy, which is a kind of creative process in and of itself. And frequently, actually, in our country, when we think about creativity, and when we teach it to our students, we think about collaboration. So the idea that a lone artist or a lone scientist is the great promulgator of creativity is one idea, but it's not the only idea. There's also the just as we're having now, we're talking about the creative process. Perhaps something interesting and creative will come out of that for both of us that would not have happened individually. We also at Emory have a major program in, of course, in Western medicine and Western science and drug discovery. And we're very famous for having, out of that drug discovery program, one of the primary therapies for AIDS. And that idea and that approach to drug discovery is being spread throughout the university. And we tend to concentrate in our science, but also our arts and humanities and social sciences on multidisciplinary teams. And I wondered if you have multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary programs and centers as well.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, we try to group people together when there's a project that can link people together. Because each person is specialized in one particular thing. For example, I'm a chemist, so I know a lot of chemistry, but chemistry alone cannot solve certain problem. For example, you're talking about developing new drugs. Certainly, you need biologists involved. Nowadays, we also need computer scientists because they can do a lot of statistics and correlations. So by having a project to link people together, we can get all of our brain power together to solve the problem. So we now very much encourage our colleagues to work together for any problem that requires more than one discipline. For example, recently we set up another project based on sinology and Chinese ancient knowledge study. In China, we believe that our knowledge for the last 4,000 years is very important. There are a lot of things that we need to study. What we call that Chinese study. And people from outside, like in America or in Japan or Europe, when they study Chinese matter, they study the same thing. They call it sinology. Essentially the same topic. However, because we look at it from a different angle, we end up have slightly different results. Maybe we call it different flavors of the same problem. Also, we also put in a little bit difference in emphasis of the area we study. But if we get those people together by discussing what they found it would be very interesting. You'll find suddenly that, oh, you have studied that. And that's one thing I haven't thought of, and this can help my study.
Right.
So we are now having a center for, we call it Chinese study and sinology. So we'll invite people from United States, from Europe, from Japan, and our Chinese scholars from China, and our people together. So we have brainstorming and discussion. And then the result, obviously that's mostly in Chinese when they are in discussion, will translate into different languages, because this university has a very strong translation department. Once they translate the results, that means then all around the world they will understand this discussion, and then we can stimulate more thinking from outside. And in science, for example, we are very interested in new material science. To make the new material requires chemists to make it, but you need a lot of physicists to test it.
Sure.
And then some engineers to put it together to make device. So we try to put together teams with different people from different disciplines and look at the same topic, but then based on the different input, you can make it easier to make a breakthrough. So essentially, very similar to your university, we use interdisciplinary approach to solve problems now.
Do you find that some of your scholars who were taught in a particular discipline or have, and were taught solely in that discipline, have difficulty reaching out to researchers and scholars in other fields? Do they ever feel blocked or resistant to that idea?
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
At the beginning, yes.
At the beginning,
At
yes.
the beginning, most people feel that they don't want to be bothered by others.
Yes.
And they don't want to touch somebody else's area. But that's only at the beginning. Once they break that barrier, they will find that it's so productive to work with others. They would love to do it.
So does this way of thinking about science, and also we've just been touring your School of Communication, so I can see a lot of collaborative work there as well, and creative undertakings. But does this approach that you have with your faculty, does this filter down into your teaching, into your students, into your classroom, where you have maybe team projects and assignments, group assignments, and sharing of knowledge and approaches that way as well?
Yeah, exactly. Now it becomes the university's main mission to try to break the barriers between disciplines. And hopefully to bring up more productivity. So this is for students. They have projects. Each student, when they graduate, they need to finish a project, which requires independent study.
Right.
But even for an independent study, the project can be interrelated with another project. Both of them are independent, but the two of them can work together, or 3 or 4 or 5 people can work together for a big problem. For our teachers who teach one particular area, in fact, having them to be exposed to other area can help them to teach their own area too. I recently find that talking to business people, for example, can enlighten me on how to manage a university. Because sometimes they are very creative in solving a very difficult problem, administrative problem. For example, how to work with the government. They know how to handle all the difficult work. Sometimes we find we are hitting the wall. But after talking to them, I find that may not be true. You can get around the wall. So it's actually a very interesting experience.
So you're learning from your business colleagues. That's a multidisciplinary endeavor as well. Do you find that, I know that you have been, spent a lot of time in the U.S. and that you went to some U.S. institutions of higher education. And did you teach also in the United States?
No, I didn't. I went to University of Chicago as a PhD student. After that, I went to work for industry.
Oh, that's right.
So I was in industry for 12 years before I came back.
And do you find that, so you would be a person who would be familiar with American-style education.
Yes.
And I know that this university, along with the other universities in Hong Kong, are moving more from a British 3-year system to an American-style 4-year system. And I believe the Chinese educational system is also 4-year.
Exactly.
Is that right? So what do you think the benefits of that are for your students? Because it sounds like it's a very complicated process of moving from one structure to a completely different structure and schedule.
Yeah. Actually, it's not that complicated as many of our colleagues have studied in 4-year colleges. The 4-year college has a tremendous advantage over 3 years. If you just want to go to university to learn a skill, then 3 years is sufficient. But if you want to have the student to learn the skills plus developing his personality as a very responsible citizen and enjoy the campus life, then 4 years is necessary. So I find this is very encouraging, having the opportunity to go for 4 years. Actually, the difficult part for Hong Kong is changing from 3 years to 4 years is not a switch, because there are people going to the 4-year college at the same time as there's another group of people going for the 3 years. So you have 2 groups of people going to the university at the same time. That is a difficult part. But
the transition part.
The transition, the first transition year is most difficult because we don't have enough space in the university. We don't have enough dormitories. And the money the government is giving to us is insufficient. So that is a challenge.
Right. So it calls upon the president to be very creative.
Exactly. So all of us, president of the university, feel that this is a big challenge.
And it sounds like also as part of that 4-year program, you're also going to have a general education type requirement or a liberal arts component to the education. So that students would have an opportunity, in addition to perhaps studying chemistry, they might also study anthropology, or journalism, or they have requirements. Is that right? They'll have 2 years of requirements. And what do you, in terms of students being both more creative while they're students, but also once they graduate, what do you see as the potential benefits of having that kind of more liberal arts style education?
Yeah, actually, the new change is that we now require students to take 128 credits when they complete the study, and only 60 credits are for their special discipline. That means that there's more. 68 credits are for either general education or elective courses.
And that's in the 3-year program?
That's in the 4-year program.
Oh, that's in the 4-year program.
Now, if a student is very interested in a particular area outside of the special discipline, he has actually 68 programs, 68 credits to use. So, but we do have certain credits they must take. For example, ethics is a very important part.
And that's an important part of Emory University as well. We have a strong emphasis on ethics.
Oh, that's good. Because we find that we are not training technicians. We are training the future leaders of the world. Therefore, our students must have very strong ethics training and philosophy, history. We also have our students learn living harmoniously with others. So all kinds of what we consider to be important values of living can be embedded in the programs. And then we also have students who study chemistry, for example, but they also want to study some business class so that when they go out to eventually become a manager or director or vice president of a company, he actually knows how to do those things. Of course, he can learn those things later on, but having a little bit background in the university can help him to get faster to get to the position. So we find that having a 4-year program, our student can become better trained. Having more broader training means that they can also become more creative whenever they need that later on.
They can draw upon those resources.
Exactly.
Do your students here I know Hong Kong is a very, very international city. I've been very impressed by just walking around. You can tell that people from all over the world congregate here. And do you find that your students are especially interested in and receptive to students from other cultures or from visitors from other cultures or languages? Are they? How do they respond to the international, cosmopolitan nature of the city and the world?
Actually, our students love to have visitors. The reason is they can learn another culture. Well, of course, when other people come to Hong Kong, it's much easier to talk to them.
Right.
But our students also want to go outside. We have programs to encourage students to go outside for half a year or 1 year and study abroad. The mix of those things can make our students more internationalized, and they find themselves to be more confident when later on, when they take on a job that requires a broader or more international approach. So I think having students to come to our university from abroad definitely is a very good stimulating factor. I find it particularly helpful. The only difficult part for Hong Kong is that, again, I always want to complain, is that government does not provide enough dormitories for our students. For example, our local students, if they don't have dormitory, they may be able to take it. But for somebody from United States come to Hong Kong, if they don't have a dormitory, they don't know the area well enough.
Right.
It's a very difficult time for them.
So many of them, at least in the first year or so, are still living at home, right?
Now, in Hong Kong, the government gives us enough dormitory space that each student in their 4-year study can stay in dormitory for 1 year.
For 1 year.
But
right.
this is insufficient. I would love to have our students stay for the whole time because campus life means after class you can talk to the teacher, talk to other students instead of having to rush home. So that relaxed atmosphere can generate good collaboration among
and
students.
community, a sense of community. Also a sense of strong connection to your university.
To the university, exactly,
Right.
yeah.
And so do you have activities here for your students? Do you have clubs and
Yes, we do.
programs? Yes, actually I met one of your students the other night who is actually in advertising, but she's in the drama club. And so she's using her advertising background to help the drama club. And she seemed very excited about it and said that it was very time-consuming, but also very satisfying.
Right.
So you have a wide range of clubs
Many
and
of them. The
programs.
students are very proud of their club. The first day of the university, in September, when we opened the university for students to come in, the students would set up their own shop. They show how well they are doing and attract other students to join. And I find them to be quite professional.
Yes.
So I think this is very good training for them.
And when the students first come to university, I assume at our university, the president often speaks to the entering students, both graduate students and undergraduate students, and delivers some words of wisdom to the entering students. Do you have the same convocation?
Yes, we do.
And so what kinds of advice, what sorts of advice do you give to your students, or what kind of direction do you provide to them in your speech and when they first come to the university?
Right.
What do you want for them?
My first speech, actually, I was very impressed by Linus Pauling, who got a Nobel Prize in chemistry. I heard one time that he spoke after getting the Nobel Prize. He represented all the other Nobel Prize winners to speak to the younger people. I find it very interesting. He said, when you talk to an older guy, you should listen very carefully, and you should talk to him with respect, because this is a guy having the wisdom. But the important thing is don't believe everything he said. Because no matter how smart he is, he may not be 100% correct. And then the most important thing is eventually it's you who will be responsible for what you're doing.
Right.
So I always like to teach our students a very similar thing, that they should listen to the teachers very carefully and with respect. And also, if they don't understand things, they should go to the teachers and other students. But the most important thing is you always having yourself to be responsible for what you are doing. So therefore, you should always use your brain rather than just absorb things from outside.
Right.
So I think our students, if they can use their brains more often and think more critically for themselves, they can become a leader much easier in the future.
And so you communicate that to them. And you mentioned Linus Pauling. Do you have other thinkers or scientists or writers or artists who inform your own thinking about life or about education or about creativity? Do you have any favorite writers or?
Many.
Yes, yeah.
There's a Chinese, actually he's a history teacher at Zhongshan University. Now it's called Sun Yat-sen University. He's he is a man lived. He passed away during the Cultural Revolution. He's a very famous Chinese scholar by the name of Chen Yin-che. Actually, his name is very interesting. The correct pronunciation by the dictionary, he should be Chen Yin-ke, because his last name, I said Chen Yin-che. But everybody call him Chen Yin-che. That name is, by the dictionary, is wrong. But actually, that's correct, because that's the name his father called him. In China, because it's unlike English. English is phonetic, so you cannot spell anything wrong. Chinese character is writing, so you can pronounce it any way you want. But usually we pronounce it based on the dictionary. But this guy, he was so famous, and since he calls himself the way his father called him, so which is the wrong one. But on the other hand, that becomes the correct one.
Sure.
He has one idea. He said, when you do study, you must have freedom to do your own study, and then you must have independent thinking. Those two elements, freedom and independence, are the most important part of our research and study. I totally agree with that. When I took up the presidency of this university in the gala dinner, I wrote a poem. And the first quote I use is the first line is this independence and freedom, and in fact it's very nice. Lisa, our manager for the communication department, asked one student to make up a performance. She recited the poem, and she did an excellent job. And so I was very impressed.
Well, I like that idea that you just described, because it has at least three elements of creativity. One element is looking to somebody that you admire from the past for the words of wisdom and the way of thinking, but emphasizing that freedom and independence. Another part of it is that you wrote your own poem about this, so that's very creative. Had you written poetry before?
I write it often. When I was a little kid, I liked poetry a lot. But I was discouraged because poetry, particularly in Chinese, when we write one line, it usually has two meanings. Now, that can be dangerous because if people interpret it not the way you roll, then you become an anti-revolutionist in China, that you can be in jail. So my father always discouraged me from writing poem. But now I think we are living in a very free world. I like to use poetry to express my thought because poetry is easy to remember. Also, your idea can flow when you are writing poetry. In fact, I think poetry itself is sort of creativity because using a different word at a different point can make the whole poem completely different. So the choice of one word sometimes requires a lot of creativity. So I enjoy doing that because when I do that, I feel completely relaxed.
Right. And then the third element of creativity in that little story that you told was the performance and the student giving the performance, and that's an element of collaboration as well. You have the poet, and then you have the reader, and then furthermore you have an audience as
they
well.
also put music on it.
Oh, really?
So it is fantastic.
Did you tape it? Is that tape?
Yeah, you must have the tape.
Okay, well, we would like to see it. I'd like to see the poem as well. So that was, when you became president, that was fairly recently, was it?
That was done maybe in October last year.
Yeah, so very recently. And I like the idea that you used that moment of your kind of beginning the presidency for people were expecting perhaps a scientist, a chemist, that approach, and instead you took a different perspective. And how do you find, you've talked a little bit about this, but I'm interested in more about it, ways to generate your own creativity as a president, because of course I'm sure you have a very
Right.
tight schedule, and you also have a lot of demands,
Right.
and then you have the government on the
Yeah.
one hand, and faculty and
Sure,
students
yeah,
as
yeah.
well. So a lot of people
Yeah.
who require your time and attention. But it's also important for you to stay a creative
Yeah.
person as well. So how
Right.
do you generate that
Yeah.
creativity within yourself?
I learn from my colleagues and I learn from my students.
Right.
When I teach students, most people think that I'm teaching them, but at the same time, I'm also learning from them.
Sure.
So I like to talk to people, anybody, when I have a chance to talk to. I find that sometimes they learn from me, but most of the time I feel that I'm learning from them. Sometimes they say something, they may not have thought of it as important, but to me, I suddenly, like a lightning, hit me. That's it. Then there are many moments like that, because once you catch that moment, then you can analyze it later on and come up with the whole proposal. So I do that very often, and I was very fortunate that I have many good friends, and I enjoy very much talking to people, and sometimes have a glass of wine. We feel very relaxed. At that time, suddenly somebody raised a question you haven't thought before, and nobody has an answer. But after talking, discussing, we come up with something.
Right.
And then with more careful thinking and consulting with others, you come up with something eventually very concrete. And I consider that's a process of creativity.
So that's the creative process for you. Well, that's very consistent, actually, with this idea of this conversation, that out of a conversation and people can exchange ideas and backgrounds and
Yeah,
history, and
right.
we can begin to understand a little bit more about how the creative spirit
Right.
might move us. Tell me a little bit more about what your initial ideas are for your Creativity Institute, how you expect that to develop. Will you have a building? Will you have a director? Will you have various initiatives? Or is that all just in the very early stages?
Right. Now it's too early. Now this university does not have space, so I just use my residence as the creativity
that makes
center.
sense.
So it's a cradle for the Center for Creativity, the institute. But we definitely will have world-class scholars. Right now, the first batch of scholars are all chair professors. All the chair professors in the university. Our chair professors are the highest ranked professors in the university. So they are all the backbones of this Institute of Creativity. Then we are going to invite people from around the world. I hope we can invite more from Emory University.
We'll be happy to collaborate
I hope
with you
you
on that.
also come more often in the
Absolutely.
future, because by inviting people from different places, we can have good discussion and have sparks of new ideas. And our colleagues are also the backbones. Therefore, they all diligently working very hard and trying to find something useful for our students. But in terms of building, I'm confident that I'm working very hard now. Sooner or later, we'll be able to get a building for that. Also, we'll later on may define some classes that can help students to think more creatively. I don't think you can just teach a course and people become creative. It's not that way. Creativity is built in each person's mind. When they were born, they were already built in with a gene that can become creative. What we have to do is stimulate them so that they can open up and have the creativity coming up from themselves. So I think in 5 years' time, we should be able to see something more solid.
And do you see that as an important part of the character of this university, that Creativity Institute, a cornerstone perhaps of the way that you want to educate, the way you want to conduct research, the way you want to shape your community?
Exactly. I hope that in the future, when people remember us, they will expect us to be a responsible citizen with very strong emphasis on ethics and creativity. The rest is learnable, but ethics and creativity are the important pillars of our education.
And like creativity, ethics is not something that can be easily taught either.
Exactly.
That's something you often figure out in the process of making a decision. So how do you go about influencing your students to be more ethically open, or more ethically, we say at our university, we say ethically engaged. That's our term that we use. So how do you influence your students to be more ethically engaged?
In China, our teachers like to use themselves to be the example for the students. If we do a good job upholding the principle of ethics, when we talk to students, we always slowly infuse the idea of ethics to them. You cannot just say that you write this down, this is ethics. They don't believe it. But every day, daily life, you talk to the student, they would feel this is part of their life. When I go to Japan, for example, I'm very impressed by the Japanese. When you look at, after the tsunami, you can look at the Japanese people, how well behaved they are. You find that this country are doing a good job in teaching ethics. I think we should do a similar thing. The Japanese, their parents teach them, so they would consider breaking the rule as a shameful thing. We should do the same thing to our students. So our colleagues must first do a good job.
They have to exemplify.
They have to exemplify that to our students. The students will exemplify to the younger students. So one generation to another generation will go on.
And do your faculty, do your professors share some of their own personal experiences or ideas with the students, or do they do it kind of just by example, or do they actually share the stories of their life or their past, or how they perhaps wish they'd made a different decision, or how they feel proud of a decision that they made? Do they provide that kind of personal insight to their students?
Our colleagues are quite diversified. I think many of them do that.
Some do, and some don't.
Some may not have done enough. So I think this is normal.
That's very
But
normal.
what we are doing is we will form an atmosphere, and so that people will find slowly they want to be part of it, and they know the value of this kind of education. They would identify themselves with this kind of education.
What are the biggest challenges that you feel you are facing as president of this university at this moment in time?
My biggest challenge now is to find a space for our colleagues and our students.
So it's very practical.
It's very practical. But actually, I'm quite optimistic because nothing is impossible. I always feel that if the whole university is working together and we all have the same target going there, there are difficulties, but we can remove that, and one step at a time. Even for space, we have many other approaches. We are actually doing a lot of things. I'm pretty sure in 5 years' time, we'll be much, much better off than now.
When you were at Emory University, we talked about how we have many similarities. That we grew out of a religious-based education, but now we're a major research university in the United States. That we had 175 years, but really it's been over the past 30 years where we've had this very, very strong trajectory into the national and now international scene. And that you also have hopes for Hong Kong Baptist University, because you were just started in the 1950s, right? And that you hope to also have that kind of larger trajectory as well.
Right. Actually, the visit to Emory University is the best thing in my life.
Wow.
The reason is that I always thought that Baptist is so small and our resources so limited. It's very difficult for us to reach to the top. But after visiting you, it actually changed my whole philosophy, because with one large donation and with ambitious planning and careful execution, you have created a miracle, I must say. In the last 30 years, 30 years in our lives is very short. But Emory, from a teaching college, become a world-class university, and now with so many outstanding professors. I think this is something now I feel that I can do it. So this is something very important to us. Confidence is very important.
It is important. Yeah. Confidence is important to creativity as well, because even if you have challenges and you feel you can overcome them, then you seek new ideas and new approaches for doing that. Well, I feel really honored that we've been able to spend this time together and think about these creative processes as well. I have one final question for you, and that is, we live in a global community, and Hong Kong really is the gateway city in a way, gateway to China, and then a gateway for China to the rest of the world. And so in a way it feels to me like you have a special place and a special moment in history. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how these winds of change that have been sweeping across the world in China and also in Hong Kong in particular, and how that has affected your kind of view of the world.
I think Hong Kong now has a very important role to play. We are very I think it's also an opportunity for us, because Hong Kong is right. You're absolutely right. It's the gateway to China and the gateway for China to go outside. To China means actually Hong Kong, for most foreigners, before they know about China, when they come to Hong Kong, it's more comfortable, easy to understand, and then they also can understand more about China. So this is a good bridge. I would consider it as a bridge. What we want to do in the future is we would like to work together with people in the United States and Europe and Japan, that means around the world. And then we also want to work with our colleagues in China. By bringing all the brain powers together, I think it's good for the whole world. Actually, I find another thing about collaboration is more than just getting the project done. Once the project's finished, you have many good friends. Friends are for lifetime. So I think it's important to have good friends for everybody.
Well, relationships are so important to our ability to build and to grow together, and I feel like perhaps we're at the beginning of our relationship between as friends, but also as universities that have similar goals and traditions. We have met your students. 4 of your students were our guides the other day from the School of Communications, and they were very, very open with us about how excited they are to be your students with their learning, and very gracious to us as well. We've met many of your faculty. Your faculty were at Emory, some of them with you, and then we've met more here today. And we've now had a chance to see your university. So we're extremely grateful for your friendship and hospitality.
Yeah, thank you very much. I enjoy very much both the visit to you and also your visit to us. I think this is just the beginning for a very long and very productive collaboration. And I hope that in the future you can bring more of your colleagues to us, and we'll have more colleagues to visit you. I think one thing in common between us is that we both start reasonably small, and we also have the same dream. We want to become the best. So I think, and the other thing is, we are from a Christian heritage. I think Emory is also having a similar background. That's actually in Hong Kong, religion does not really interfere with academic study, but religion has its advantage because it gives some impact on the ethical training. So I think both in terms of religious relationship and philosophical similarity and our dream for the future, I think, I hope we can all work together.
Well, I look forward to these future creative collaborations. Thank you very much. I enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you very much.
The preceding program is copyrighted by Emory University.